14 feet, 8 feet.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, welcome to Comic Book Pros, presented by the Lake Como Comic Art Festival, an interview show where we talk to some of the most interesting and creative comic artists working today. I'm your host, Scott Dunbier, ready to take you on another ride through the colorful world of comic art.
Comic Book Pros is sponsored by the Lake Como Comic Art Festival, and I want to tell you about what makes this thing so special. Join us May 17th to 19th for 3 days celebrating comic art against the stunning backdrop of Lake Como, Italy. Are you ready for an unforgettable experience? Whether you're a seasoned comic collector or just dipping your toes into the world of comic art, the Lake Como Comic Art Festival has something for everyone. Who says you shouldn't meet your heroes? At Como, you'll have the chance to meet some of the biggest names in the industry. Legendary artists, writers, creators, and with only 1,000 attendees, you'll for sure have the opportunity to meet and interact with your favorites in real life. Don't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to celebrate your love for comics in the picturesque setting of Lake Como. The Lake Como Comic Art Festival is happening May 17th to 19th, 2024, and tickets are limited, so reserve your slot today. You can find tickets and more at www.lccaf.com. That's www.lccaf.com. Don't miss out on this exclusive event.
Today we're turning our spotlight on a creator whose work I know you are familiar with, John Romita Jr. John's dynamic artwork was a staple of Marvel Comics for decades, illustrating some of their most beloved heroes such as Spider-Man, Daredevil, X-Men, and Iron Man. In 2008, he co-created with Mark Millar the series Kick-Ass, an unconventional take on the superhero genre that showcased his versatility as an artist and was later adapted into a successful film franchise. John Romita Jr.'s style is full of bold lines, kinetic energy, and unmistakable style, a storyteller who weaves tales that leap off the page and into the hearts of readers. So settle in as we explore the life, work, and creative process of John Romita Jr. Hello, John. Welcome to the show. It's good to see you again.
Great to be seen. And Scott, good to see you too, boss.
All right. So, I'd like to dig into your background a little bit. I mean, you have, a very interesting history. You were fortunate enough to be raised in a home with someone who can only be called a true legend, your father, John Romita Sr. So what was it like growing up with such an incredible artist, such an incredible talent, somebody who really, sort of redefined one of Marvel's biggest characters?
The interesting part of this was finding out as we were older, I say we, my brother and myself, as we got older, finding out how brilliant the man was when we were younger. We didn't know it. We were kids. And yet I found out about the business because I literally I couldn't sleep some nights with the monsters under my bed. I'd go up into the attic where he was working and would stand behind him. And the stuff that I was bored with was the romance stuff. But when he started doing comics, adventure comics, the stuff that I saw in the barbershop when we were kids with a Batman and a Superman comic book on the table next to us, we never paid attention. But when I walked in on him doing a Daredevil cover, with the number 12 with Kazar up in the tree and the Plunderer and his guys surrounding Daredevil, and apparently my mouth dropped when he was explaining to me this is a superhero. He's going to beat up these bad guys, and oh, by the way, he's blind. And I think the top of my head exploded. I've told this story a million times, and he told me that I got down on the floor and started scratching on the whatever scrap paper was on the floor because I wanted to be just like Dad. And that was a hinge. That was the linchpin to me becoming a cartoonist, because I started drawing and doodling from the age 7 on, and he would only do that, yeah, right. Enjoy it, kid. You're great. But when I got older and started to do things that made sense, then we got closer and I started to pay attention to what he was doing and realized this man's brilliant. And then my brother and I would look at what he did when he was a teenager. We started investigating Dad, because the cartooning end of it was one thing. But when people would come over and talk to us about what he was like, when he did paintings for the Women's Army Corps in the Korean War. He did a painting at age 18 I can't do now. We found out that the man was a brilliant a fine artist, and that cartooning was, as most Depression era people are, just a way of putting food on the table. But he never got he never got the adulation he should have as being a fine artist. All this came down to me being intimidated as a young artist. That you have, it's like a kid having LeBron James as a father, and
Sure.
you want to be a basketball player. So, oh damn, I'm never going to be as good. But apparently, it invigorated me to be better because I saw it firsthand. So this gigantic circle of events, it all filtered down to me becoming an artist. And my mother tells me that had I not had excuse the expression, testicular fortitude to stick with it, despite having this brilliant, brilliant artist in my life, instead of getting frustrated, I would get frustrated and then get back up on top and fight more. So I learned through it wasn't me, it was around me. I learned to grab it and learn how to get better and want to get better, because instead of getting frustrated and intimidated further, watching him made me want to get better. And two things: intimidation was great, intimidation was bad. Intimidation bad being, oh damn, I'm never going to be that good. Intimidation great is, I want to get better because this man was so genius.
That's really wonderful. So I was going to ask you if he was encouraging in your career and from an early age, but it sounds like he really was, right?
He was, but only if I asked. And I remember the conversation that I would draw something and he would look over my shoulder and then not say a word. And then I would bring it to him and ask him a question. Then he would talk to me. He did not want me to think I had to do what he was doing. And that were his words. I don't want you to, just because I'm an artist doesn't mean you have to do this. And as I got better, he even then wouldn't be proactive about it. He would wait for me to ask questions. And then the conversation would blow into an hour-long, 2-hour-long conversation. And he never shied away from telling me that I had to learn and that I had to stand up on my own 2 feet, that I'm not helping you.
Sure.
This is you. You got to do this. And listen, it's like being an athlete. I compared it with LeBron James. You have to do it on your own. You have no choice. And the ironic part, and you know this, Scott, the ironic part is that I had to stand up on my own 2 feet working for Marvel as a kid because I got treated like dog shit because I was my father's son. And people, listen, I don't know if you were going to go in this direction anyway, but the people treated me like dog shit. And he said to me, keep your hands in your pocket. Listen, we came from a rough part of New York.
Sure.
He said, keep your hands in your pocket and your mouth shut, which is what a Depression era person would say. Do your job, shut your mouth, get paid, and turn everybody else's mic off. But the words were awful from people. You know, you're only in this because of your father. You're never going to be as good as your father. You suck. You know, you're awful. And I would say back to them, Mom, you can't talk to your son like that. That's not right to do it. That's an old joke. I use that all the time. But the truth of the matter was the people, there were a lot of people that were angry at me for doing this. And he said, shut them up by doing the work and no other way.
Hey, the best revenge is a good career, right? You know, to prove that.
That's basically how he phrased it. It was just shut them up by doing your job. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, just to make a very small comparison, when I started working for Jim Lee at Wildstorm, there was a term that was given to me. I was called an FOJ, which was friend of Jim. You know, and I had to prove myself, and you know, hopefully I did eventually. But getting back to your younger days, so one of the things you did very early on when you were, I believe you were 13 years old, that you actually created a character, the Prowler. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, as I mentioned a few minutes ago about drawing on scrap paper all over the place. I got a pad given to me, a pad of paper. It was a gift. That's what we could afford for gifts was pads of paper. And I started drawing, and I would do the typical stuff that kids would do. And either it was a film, and I heard the word Prowler about a guy that was going to burglarize a house. Forgot how it got into my mind, but I started drawing this character, and of course it was awful artwork. And I would show my father and say, "This is the Prowler," and this, it was just typical skin tight costume covering all the face because I couldn't draw any face. And I said, "What you think you could use it, Dad?" Of course it was ludicrous that I was asking, but because he was a good father, he took it to Stan Lee. I didn't expect him to take it to Stan Lee, but he was working with Stan at that time. And Stan said, "I love the name, hate the artwork," and boom. And that's where it went.
That's a great story. But so, when you eventually broke into comics, one of your first jobs, and if this is something that you're not fond of, because artists look back on their early work and they don't necessarily see it the way fans do, but the first work that I saw by you that I really noticed, and to this day, it is kind of my favorite Iron Man work. I mean, it might be something that you look back on and, hopefully you don't cringe, but when I was a kid, when I was, I don't know, I think I was probably 14 years old when that stuff started coming out. And that's my Iron Man. I mean, the stuff that you did with Michelini on that was just phenomenally good to me. I was never an Iron Man guy at all until I saw the stuff that you did, and you and Bob Layden, and it was just wonderful stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit? What was it like
Yeah,
getting a start so early and on one of Marvel's really, main characters?
yeah. The fact that Dan Atkins had quit the assignment, and there was nobody else available. And I remember the editor coming in and saying, "I don't believe in nepotism, but I don't believe in anti-nepotism. So if you can do this, would you like to do Iron Man?" I had been working as an art consultant and a window washer and a floor washer at the time. I was doing anything and everything to make a couple of bucks. That I literally stopped school after my second year to go work at Marvel as an assistant. When they offered this to me after me doing pinups and covers for the British department and anything and everything I could do, they thought I had a chance of doing some stuff. Handed it to me, and Bob Layton was the ink artist, and Michelini. I was terrified. That was the intimidation, that first foray, and
Sure.
the stories were brilliant, and I mean innovative. The thing about Tony Stark's alcoholism, just staggering, and the story overshadowed the minor art that I was doing. My art was, there's an expression, "Oh Lord, please don't let me fuck this up." Well,
Yeah,
that came from an astronaut, and I think
yeah.
but this is the same thing. I was given a chance to do anything. Please don't let me screw this up. And I managed to hold on at water level because the stuff was not that good. Bob Layton was powerful in what he did, and Michelini's stories were fantastic. And the story overshadowed the art as far as I'm concerned. And that's actually important. And I don't mind that even now. If somebody tells me I read the story and it's a great book, instead of saying, "I read the story and your artwork is great," I don't want to hear that. I want to see this as the big picture. And that's what it was with Iron Man. And it's very humbling to know that you're not the most important part of this process, but the story is, and you learn, and that's what it was, and it became an important part of of Marvel's line, and we're very proud of that because considerably, what were the top characters were Spider-Man and Daredevil, Captain America. Iron Man was not considered the top of the pile, and we kind of contributed to it becoming an A-list character.
He
And
was
I'm very,
kind of a
very
B.
proud of it.
He was kind of a B character at the time, and also what's interesting is, I went back and I did a little bit of research on it. I was kind of shocked by how brief that run was. you know?
3
I mean,
years? Forgot. I think it was 3 years.
I think it was less than that, but whatever, it
Really?
was just, but it was a great period, you know? So what was the next thing you did after Iron Man? You left Iron Man and you did a few things like Contest of Champions. You did your first run on X-Men. Were those the next things
I
after Iron
don't.
Man?
I think I did Spider-Man not too long. I think I stopped Iron Man because I was offered Spider-Man. I believe I did that 7-page mess that Al Milgram saved, Chaos at the Coffee Bean, and
Right.
uh, again having my father's Spider-Man stuff be so ever present as the genius that it was would stand. Uh, Again, you either stand up or you're going to fall down, and I had to show myself. I think I went to Spider-Man before the X-Men. I didn't do X-Men until after I was doing Spider-Man, and the Contest of Champions. I don't remember the timeline on it, but it was after Spider-Man. The fact that the '80 Olympics, the president at the time, Jimmy Carter, boycotted the '80 Olympics because of some politics with Russia and Afghanistan, and
Sure.
Russia invaded Afghanistan, yada yada. So the Olympics series that I was going to do got turned into Contest of Champions with 1 million characters in it. I swear I thought I was being punished, but I had to do every single character. Every character in the existence of mankind was in that series. But
And it
I
was
think
huge. I mean, that was a huge series too, right?
that was the first. Now, wasn't that the first large series, arc series? There was something about it being the first something, and we didn't realize it was going to be what it is, what it was until after it was out, and we said, "Oh, this is pretty good." But it was the challenge. Now, the timeline, I don't remember it in accordance with X-Men, but I think because I did so many characters in Contest of Champions, they said, well, this guy can obviously handle a group book. And I remember John Byrne calling me and saying, this is going to fry your ass, this group book. And he complimented Chris Claremont without anything glowing. In other words, it's tough to do because it's such a great book. And you're either going to stand up or you're going to fall down. There it is again. And he warned me that it's going to be tough, but very rewarding. And Byrne was great about it. And Chris wasn't happy because I was such an inexperienced artist. And Paul Smith had been on it prior to me. Paul Smith was fantastic. So Chris was a little bit disappointed, but we developed a nice camaraderie after that. And the book did well, and I was very proud of it. And again, I went on Spider-Man 2 or 3 times. I went on X-Men a couple of times, Iron Man 2 or 3 times. They couldn't get rid of me.
Oh, cool. I'd like to talk a bit about another book that you did that was one that, you know, for me especially, you know, I sort of looked at you in a new way because your style was evolving. You know, your style has changed a lot over the years, obviously. But, you know, when I really started to go, wow, this guy is really something, was on Daredevil, you know, and you worked with Ann Nesenti, but you also got to work with another true legend, Al Williamson, an old pal of mine who was just, you know, I mean, what was it like working with Al?
Oh God! First, working with Ann is what the special part of that was as a writer. She's brilliant, and the story was that when I was fed up with Marvel to a certain extent because I was supposed to get back on the X-Men, and after doing Starbrand or something, I forgot how that timeline went, and they wouldn't let me get back on X-Men because they picked up somebody else that was a fan favorite. I was a little frustrated that I was kind of mistreated. And again, to me, it goes back to that lack of respect because I was a Romita. And even if it wasn't, in the back of my mind, that's what it was. So I was ready to just throw my hands up in the air and get into advertising, which is what I had my degree in. And literally, as I'm walking out the office door, Ralph Macchio said, "Where you going? You can't be that upset," because I was yelling in my father's office. And he says, "Well, don't go anywhere yet. I want to talk to you." And he said, "We have a chance to do work on Daredevil. Would you like to work on Daredevil?" And I didn't know what to say because I was fed up with it. He says, "You can have part of plotting. You could be contributing to the stories. You do your full pencils, anything as you want to do. It's all up to you. I like what you've done here and there and here. You've done Spider-Man, so I know you can do cities. You've done Contest of Champions, so you can handle large volumes of work and so on. And it's a great character. And Ann's got this great storyline coming up." And I said, "Oh, I'll listen." And he says, "Well, we have no inker. Well, who would you like?" And I said John Romita Sr. first, or I said, "Oh, no, Al Williamson." I was joking, figuring he was going to laugh at me. He says, "I'll call him." And as I'm standing in the office doorway, he calls Al Williamson. And Al Williamson said yes on the phone. I know what he does. Apparently, he liked what I had done too.
Right.
I don't know if Al was drunk at the time. I don't know, but Al Williamson, one of the great illustrators that ever worked in the comics industry.
Sure.
Everybody knows how brilliant the man is. And he said he would love to work on Daredevil, and he'd love to work with the little Romita. I couldn't believe my ears. And then Ann Ascenti gave me the first plot, and I loved every second of it and every word of it. And we had a great pairing, Ann and I. We got along famously on it. And she asked for my opinion on things. She asked for my story ideas. She gave me little to work on. There were plots. They called it the Marvel way. There was synopsis, and it was not a lot of wording, not a lot of pages of story. It was whatever you wanted, as long as you stick to my editorial slant.
Right.
And if I give some dialogue, the dialogue would only be for expressions and acting. It was the Marvel way, and she and I got along famously that way. And she let me do whatever I wanted, which hadn't happened before. I had the domineering storylines of the X-Men, and even with Iron Man, because of Michelini and Bob Layton, who were dominating the stories there.
Sure.
Even though they were plots that they gave me, those basically were scripts because I had to stick to them. Well, here I was given free reign to play. And because Ralph Macchio and I was an assistant under him with Roy Thomas coming into the office. Ralph was a great friend before that. And he dropped it in my lap, and things just blossomed from there. That was the point where things turned up. I was climbing as opposed to just hovering and staggering. And people stopped treating me like dog shit once I started doing Daredevil. It wasn't immediate, but it became a respect, a begrudging respect. And it really... everything blossomed after that because the stories that Ann and I worked on we were very fortunate. And we got a chance to do Mephisto, and I got a chance to turn Mephisto from a panty-wearing demon into a demonic-looking devil. And I was allowed to do it, even though it was my idea. The editors once they saw what I could do, they gave me room to play. And down to a storyline where... She said to me, what do you want to do? What do you have in mind? I said, well, I did a one-act play when I was in college. I wrote a one-act play, and it was called Beer with God, or Beer with the Lord. I forgot what it was. And it wasn't a religious, spiritual thing as much as it was guy walks into a bar drunk, depressed, probably suicidal, and God comes in and sits down next to him, dressed or looking like the average bum, and they have a 2-hour conversation, saves the guy's life, and he goes home to his wife. She says, I want to read it. But she says, listen, we're doing something with Mephisto. How about we just make it a beer with the devil? Daredevil, a beer with the devil, Mephisto.
Right.
There's a scene with Matt Murdock sitting at a bar, and Mephisto comes in the guise of a female. And Matt Murdock locks lips with Mephisto. This is brilliant stories. And that's Ann. And we just hit it off, and we did progressive stuff with women's rights and everything.
Sure.
I loved every second of it, and she let me contribute to it. And the pinnacle of this, which is almost comedic, is when she calls me up and says, I have an idea for a character called Typhoid Mary.
Right,
now, this was
my, of course.
This was my ex-life, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And as I'm on the phone, and she says, "Come up with a character sketch for this character. She's a suicidal, homicidal maniac." My ex-wife comes out of the bathroom dressed like Typhoid Mary, and as God is my witness, shoulder pads, fishnet stockings, gigantic hair, too much makeup, and I look up and I started scratching down on a piece of paper. And I called Ann back about 2 hours later because the ex went to
I've
work.
got it.
I said, "You won't believe what I have." And then I took a photograph. No, I didn't take a photograph. I forgot how I got it. I sent it to the Marvel offices via Hotmail, email. No email, a FedEx mail. And they loved the idea of it. It was just, it all happened. But this is the kind of thing, this great situation with Ann Nesenti. There was no email or anything. This is in the early 80s.
I know.
But that was the kind of fun I had on that character. And so we contributed some great stories, and the Kingpin and so on.
Yeah.
And it led to me working with Frank on Man Without Fear, which was separate from working with Ann. And to this day, that might be, because I got a chance to do more Marvel style storytelling, that might be the best thing I have ever done overall, art and storytelling, because I got a chance to work with another person that knows the Marvel way.
Right.
And Frank was an artist first before he was a writer, and we hit it off perfectly. It was great, and I love that character.
And again, you worked with Al, and I can tell you from personal experience, I met Al when I was probably 18 or 19 years old, and we became pretty good friends. I would go out and visit him occasionally, and we would talk a lot. And he loved working with you. I can tell you that with all sincerity. And
Thank you.
I used to be, and you remember I used to be an art dealer, so I used to actually sell those pages. I remember and it was so much fun when I would get a package in from Marvel, because Al would have the work sent to me, and I would get I'd get a package and I'd look at them and they were just gorgeous. It was just
his style, which was so illustrative. He claims, he says, "All I'm doing is tracing over your stuff, kid. Don't worry about it." Because I was in awe. And the more research I did on him, it made me even more in awe of him. And yet he would constantly defer to me. "I don't believe it. And Al, wherever you are right now, I don't believe your word you were saying when you said you're just tracing over me. You made everything look beautiful." I was lucky. I've been lucky enough to work with ink artists who are artists in their own right, have decided to just become ink artists, and they fix everything. Yeah. Whether it's my father, Al Williamson, Klaus Janson, Scott Hanna, presently, brilliant artists in their own right, not just inkers. I've been very fortunate.
All right, so I'd also like to segue a little bit. We talked about Daredevil, which that was the series that, even after Iron Man, that's the one that really hit me, because the creative team on that book was just phenomenal. And we'll move on from it, but you and Ann Nesenti, who I've always felt is an underrated writer, and Al working with you, that was just great. But then another fantastic inker that you worked with was Klaus Janson. I mean, the work you did on Punisher, I think that was the first stuff I noticed with you and Klaus working together, and that stuff was like, again, evolving. Your style made a drastic change, I think, and it was getting closer to who you are today. Can you talk a little bit about the Punisher before we get into other things?
Yeah, you mentioned my style changing. It wasn't a style change. There was no concerted effort to change my style. It was I just got better. You do
growing.
something 12 hours
growing
a day
as an artist.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. The only thing I did consciously was when Jack Kirby told me, "You need to bulk up if you want to get more power, make them 3-dimensional, make them bulky." And I remember doing a little bit too much blocky stuff, but he said, and then Romita Sr. stepped in and said, "Yeah, make it 3-dimensional with your shadows, and also when you have a character walking, there's an impression in the ground. Make sure that they have weight." And that changed me in a certain way, because I learned. But with Klaus had the same kind of art impression in his mind about power and so on. With Punisher, I remember thinking this guy is a New York street character, just like Spider-Man, just like Daredevil, so I can feel comfortable with the character. And you couldn't print out stuff from the internet. I went out and took photographs and took magazines and ripped them up for the city streets and so on. And the Punisher always reminded me of people I grew up with, his face, or relatives. And the funny part was that's why I beat him up, because nobody had a straight nose where I grew up. Nobody. Everybody looked like they'd been in a boxing match. And what killed me was that every superhero that got beat up never looked like they got beat up. And I remember telling my father, I said, "Is it okay if I mash this guy's face in?" And he used to take me to boxing matches and teach us how to box, my brother and me. And I remember looking at boxers look like their faces had been mangled.
Sure.
And I said, well, why can't we do that with the Punisher? And we did. And the writer, I'm blanking on the writer. Oh my God, I apologize. Oh, and he's a good friend. I'm blanking on it. He said, "Go right ahead, beat the crap out of the Punisher. He can't look like Superman with a straight nose and everything."
Right.
And we did that, and they actually accepted it. I said, "Holy crap, my idea!" And it went beautifully. And then what's funny was it stuck, and people started drawing the Punisher that way with the boxer's eyebrows and the broken nose. But the character was more fun than you might think. It wasn't as serious in your mind because of the stories, but it was international intrigue. It was more than just a street level vigilante, and it blossomed. And every bit I did, Klaus added balls to it with his brilliant art. Yeah. Again, I was so lucky to work with guys like that. And Klaus repaired and emboldened. It was fantastic. Chuck Dixon. I'm sorry.
Right.
Chuck was the writing equivalent of Klaus. Balls, strength, and brilliance. And there were three of us on that book, and that's why that book became so popular. I was very proud of it, and I would take anybody's compliment on that and throw it to the three of us. And here's the ultimate: is that John Buscema worked on the Punisher after I did, and he drew it. He says, I'm drawing it just like you did, kid. I said, "John, what are you, out of your mind? I was drawing Conan just because of what you did 20 years ago." He says, "Shut up. I'm just drawing your Punisher. Don't give me that."
And to me, it's funny, you were talking about Mephisto. To me, one of the best Mephisto comics ever was drawn by John in that Thor annual. Just terrific, great stuff. Yeah. But again, I would say that, Klaus really enhanced your work, I mean,
absolutely.
Just a classic great pairing. And it's funny that you mentioned Jack, who was a big influence on me personally, because I met him when I was like 15 years old, invited me to his house. And, on the other side of this wall, there's a sketch of Captain America waving, saying, "Hi, Scott," and
oh, God.
Just a great guy. But it's funny because, I noticed your work had bulked up around that time, but I never made the connection. So that's a great story. But
now listen, I got a little anecdote quickly, and we'll move on. But Jack Kirby, I was given a chance to speak to him. He's at my house, and I walked up to him like an awkward kid, even though I was not a kid at the time. And I said, "What? How do you work so fast? That's amazing." I had found out he was doing something like 7 to 10 pages a day, something incredible. And he looked at me, he had a cigar, an unlit cigar in his mouth, and he said, "How many pages you do, kid, a day?" And I said, 1. And he didn't flinch. He took the cigar out of his mouth and says, "Throw away your fucking eraser." That was his advice. In other words, and then it went on to be explained to me, what he meant was stop overthinking.
Yeah.
What you put down first is what you should be doing. Leave it. You'll be fine. I did speed up a little bit because I was a little bit more confident in what I was doing, because then he made nice things to say about me. But Buscema said gave the same kind of advice. Don't second guess yourself. What you put down is generally going to be pretty good.
Right.
When you get advice from Kirby Buscema and Romita Sr., you've got good advice.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So let's take a little bit of a jump. I mean, man, I could talk to you about this stuff all day long, and we we have time
You
limits.
were right there. You were
Um,
right there. We could do this for hours. You're right.
Absolutely, and when we see each other in Lake Como, I think we may just do that. But
You got it.
um, my question to you is, obviously, you've done so much, but then you did a book with Mark called Kick Ass that was really, sort of revolutionary. I mean, Mark is a terrific writer. I was lucky enough to work with him on The Authority at Wildstorm, and he really brings everything into it. But so, what 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 did you see in Kickstarter? What made you want to do that series? And honestly, again, just a great art job on those books.
Interestingly enough, we worked on Wolverine,
Yeah,
Enemy of the State, and Mark is the one that tells me that because we worked on Enemy of the State. Well, first he said he wanted to work with me because he saw what I had done previously, wanted to do something with Wolverine, and then he said once we worked on it together, that it invigorated him to do something creator owned, and he wanted to work with me because he loved my storytelling. The kick-ass thing was all his idea, to the point where he came to me and said, I have this. And then as I started doing character sheets and designs, it rolled even further. Originally, it was just going to be Big Daddy and Hit Girl. And
right.
then somebody got it in his ear that he needs something more contemporary for somebody, the age, got to be a middle teen or something. And it was the Peter Parker, the advanced Peter Parker was the kid that was all of a sudden out of his element, but with no superpowers.
Right.
And it just blossomed. And then the more character sketches I did, and then the more ideas that we would put together with our putting our heads together, it just rolled. But the ultimate thing was how to work on such intense violence and gory violence and graphic violence after doing all of these years of PG-13 at the very least. I mean, at the very top. And I remember the conversation with the editor and Mark was, don't worry about it. Just whatever you want to do is going to be fine. There's going to be no restrictions. And I still, at this point, didn't think I could do the stuff that I could do. Even I had a conversation with my wife, Kathy, saying, well, how am I going to do this? She says, just go more violent. Do the same storytelling formula that you have. Just leave the blood. When somebody gets punched, a tooth flies and a nose gets broken and blood splatters. And that was the tiniest part of it. And then it blossomed into it. She said, do your storytelling with the extreme violence added in it and just don't hold back. And it blossomed into this unbelievably gory, to the point where I would go to bed at night and say, Kath, I don't know how to make this more violent. I don't know. I need to come up with something new and inventive. And we would discuss, literally before we fell asleep, we would discuss violent ways to kill people. You would have, if somebody was listening to the conversation, they would have thought we were maniacs.
That's the same kind of conversation that my wife and I have every night before we go to bed. So I understand. So I did want to ask you a little bit about what it was like with the Kick-Ass films, because am I right that you actually did some animation, or you helped do some animation on? Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
It was just offered to me. It was out of nowhere because of Mark probably urged Matthew Vaughn to do something that would connect the film and the comic book more, which was important to Mark because the films can tend to go off and splay outside of the comic, and he wanted something, and they offered me the chance to do the storyboarding and the animation for it. And I just did separate artwork and 90 seconds, whatever it was. It was a lot of fun. And I actually felt like I did something to contribute to the film. I thought I had my acting debut in this. They asked me to be a barista, and I thought they wanted me to be a lawyer. And no, that's a coffee. And they put me on camera, and then they edited. And then they edited me out because they said I didn't look authentic enough. This is supposed to be in Brooklyn. This is going. I'm the only guy from New York on the set. We're in Britain. We're in England, and I'm the only New Yorker on the set. And he says I didn't look authentic enough, so they edited
Oh my
me out.
God.
That
is
was
so
my
funny.
career. My Oscar aspirations were over.
No, when I think of you, I think of definitely Hyde Park in London. Yeah, you and me both.
Here's another little anecdote that you'll love. The producer of the film, a very tall and very elegant, elite. No, I can't say elitist. He was a sweetheart. Was apparently terrified of me because Matthew Vaughn gave him the impression that I was mafioso. I'm serious. Now, whether Matthew Vaughn was just joking with the guy or the guy, at any rate, because I was the only New Yorker with the heavy accent and I'm Sicilian, etc., this guy was terrified of me. So I said to Mark and Matthew, I said, guys, the guy thinks I'm a thug. I said, can you please tell him I'm relatively educated and relatively intelligent? And they said, no. We'll get more done if he's afraid of you. All you have to do is ask him and he'll run and get you whatever you want. And this tall, lean, lanky Brit was terrified of me because he thought I was going to break his legs.
That's so funny. You're gonna.
And after they edited me out, I should have had his legs broken. After they edited me out,
you're gonna say to him, "I will ask you to do a service for me." Right. So, I do have a question for you. So, you were a Marvel guy, except for Kick-Ass, really your entire career. What you made a big move to work at DC. What brought that on?
Well, first I did another creator own called Gray Area, which I'm very proud of.
Yes, you're right, of course.
Based on some life experiences. So there was that feeling of being able to not distance myself, but separate myself from Marvel. There was just a disagreement of contract. It was a minor thing that I felt a little bit of disrespect from one or two people, not Marvel on large.
I get it.
And I had a chance when they told me I had a chance to work on Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. These are the three most important characters possibly in the history of comics.
Sure.
And who I was going to work with was Jeff Johns. And who I was going to get to work with me as the ink artist again.
Right, of course.
So I had a chance and I took it. And my wife and I had a long discussion. She was all for it. I was hesitant because I'd been with Marvel for 30 plus years. And I'm very happy with the move. I don't know if I would have regretted not doing it, but I'm very proud of it because I got a chance to work on Superman and Batman.
Sure.
And I'm very proud of the results. Very proud of the results.
Sometimes you have to take that leap of faith,
Yeah.
and
yes.
And I find, with me personally, my wife, as I think maybe your wife is too, is maybe more confident about my abilities than I am. And
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because I was still nervous because suddenly I was under a microscope. I'm leaving Marvel and I was under a microscope. Everybody was going to look, oh, this guy thinks he's all this and all that. I got a lot of negative from fans, excuse the expression. Who do you think you are? You think you're going to change things and so on. So I was nervous until I got the first double spread of a guy with a red cape punching out a gigantic gorilla robot. I said, I've done this. And my wife said, what were you so concerned with? You've done this a million ways from Sunday. You can do this. It's just a different character.
That's right.
And again,
that's right.
Great writers, good stories. And then I got a chance to work on more stuff with Frank. We did Superman Year One with double-sized pages of and instead of me being concerned with being able to do it, suddenly I felt confident in what I was doing. Then I got a chance to work on Batman. And Batman is that amazing silhouette. Everybody in the world knows that silhouette. You don't know a Superman silhouette just because of a cape. You know a Batman silhouette. And it was moody and it was film noirish. And I did a full series of black and white, of just pencil. And it was produced from pencil now. And I felt like I was back to being in control again. Loved every second of it. And
We have
yet,
we have a visitor.
my wife Kathy is peeking over the. Come here.
Hi, Kathy.
No, Scott and I were just talking about how intelligent our wives are when it comes to art.
Yeah. Swear to God,
No,
we were.
no, I can't right now.
She's very modest, but her advice. Basically she's my editor at home. Her advice is generally good, and I have been very lucky to have her help me out with this. And again, that was part of that thing with DC. She said, "You got to try it. You'll never know until you try it," and I did. And yet, I missed Spider-Man and I missed Daredevil.
Of course,
and I got back
they're your artistic family. Your legacy.
Listen, Spider-Man was a brother, ever present in the house, and I got a chance to go back and do Spider-Man again. And I'm loving every second. Every second. Listen, Scott, this is better than having a real job. This is fun.
Of course, I completely can relate. Let me, I'll tell you. But so let's talk a little bit about the next couple of months. So in 2 months, you and I are going to be at Lake Como. And have you ever been to the show?
Never been to Lake Como. Never been to the show. I've only heard about it. I think Sienkiewicz has probably mentioned it to me once before, and in passing, but I never paid attention to it. When we were invited, I was thrilled and delighted. I can't wait. And my wife, my son, and I are going to do the convention. My son Joey, and my other parts of the family, my father-in-law, mother-in-law, my other son is going to be there. We're going to make it a family, and we're going to spend 4 days in some VRBO place and drink too much wine and have a great couple of days. And hopefully the hangover will be gone before I start the convention.
And you've been to Italy before, right?
Yes, sir. Many times.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the best food in the world. You just, it's like nothing else.
It's in the top 2. It's in the top 2. I know that, and I can't wait to go to Tokyo because I want to taste Japanese sushi, not just American sushi.
I've done that, and let me tell you, it is worth it. It is. We'll talk. I'll tell you a very funny story about going to restaurants in Japan and having very interesting different kinds of sushi. But you'll get a laugh out of it. But Lake Como. This will be my first time at the show. Also, I've actually been to Lake Como, but it'll be my first time at the show. So
that was my question. Yeah, I heard it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars was filmed there. The great shots of palaces and stuff like that. I mean, it's unreal. But this particular show is something that I'm really looking forward to because as an art guy. To me, this is the one that sort of is it's a groundbreaking kind of event. I mean, I've been to the great shows in Europe. I've been to Angoulême, I've been to Lucca, but this one, and they're wonderful, but they're also comic shows. This is a comic art show. And so to be able to hang out with, guys like you and whoever else, just everybody who's going to be there will be either someone that I look up to or I want to learn more about or just, hang out with.
Yeah, when I saw the list of talent, I was thinking along the same lines. These are people that I admire and can't wait to sit down and talk with. And what's funny is whenever I've sat with people like that, we don't talk about art.
Right.
We talk about sports. We talk about life in general. Sienkiewicz is that way. Sienkiewicz is a brilliant painter, illustrator. He and I get together. We don't talk about art. We talk about living in life and what's going on. And my car broke down. And have you tried this? And that's what I look forward to. But in an idyllic setting, I can't wait for this. My wife and I are going to get those 4 days. I heard it's 5 days. 5 days? She just yelled 5 days.
I heard.
That 5 days. There's a word for it. What is that word? It begins with a V, honey. I think it's spelled VACATION, vacation. I'm not even positive. I think we get a couple of days off. I'm looking forward to it.
That's a rarity for people like us. But
the truth.
and it's funny because what you were saying about talking to a person and you don't necessarily talk about business or art, I remember the one and only time I ever met John Buscema. It was at a show in London. I think it was the United Kingdom Comic Art Convention back in the late '80s or early '90s, and there was a party. So I didn't actually see him at the show, but I met him at this bar, and it was empty. There was nobody there, and so I see John Buscema. And so, I got to go up, right? And I sit down next to him. We have a couple of drinks, and we started talking about movies. And it turns out that we had the same at that time the same favorite movie, which was the Adventures of Robin Hood. I mean, and so
Errol Flynn.
Yeah, of course. And so we spent like an hour just talking about the Adventures of Robin Hood and the Adventures of Don Juan, another great one, which was Al's favorite one. That was Al's favorite.
Listen, this goes to what you were saying. I could speak to you for another hour about this kind of vein, but I got a story. All right. You got to give me 30 seconds to tell this story real quick. I sat down at a European convention, and Mobius and Katsuhiro Otomo were in the room, and they came over and sat down with me. And they both said, we know what you do for a living. We like your artwork. I didn't believe them. I thought it was bullshit.
Wow.
But
That's
what a heady thing. Not one moment was discussing art. It was all about Giro. Mobius wanted to meet women. He said, can we get up and go meet women? I said, because I spoke a little bit of French, and he thought I was just this Don Juan. This was long before I met you, Kathy. I promise. So along those lines, and they did not want to talk about art. They wanted to talk about life. It was great.
That's fantastic. Well, we need to wrap this up. So, John, it's been a pleasure as always. I had a great time talking with you, and I really look forward to seeing you at the Lake Como show in
we got more
in a
to
couple
talk
of
about.
months.
We got more to talk about, Scott, because then my wife is going to be sitting with us, and she will follow up and remind me of things I had forgotten.
And my wife will be there too, so it'll
Excellent.
be nice. It'll be fun.
Look forward to it.
Thank you, John.
All right, guys, be well. I'll look forward to seeing everybody in a couple of weeks. No, that's a couple of months. No, Naples is next. Sorry, Como's next month. All right, take care, Scott.
And another episode of Comic Book Pros comes to a close. A huge thank you to John Romita Jr. for joining us today. You can find more of John's work at John Romita Jr. or join us at the Lake Como Comic Art Festival to meet him in person. I'm Scott Dunbier, and as always, it's been an absolute pleasure guiding you through the colorful world of comic art. Comic Book Pros is produced by Rami Atasi and Remzi Atasi. Our executive producer is Sal Avenanti. The show is edited and mixed by Mason Vendetti. And don't forget to subscribe and watch every extended interview on the YouTube channel at Comic Book Pros, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. Follow us on Instagram and X at Comic Book Pros for updates on future episodes. Until next time, keep dreaming, creating, and exploring the fascinating world of comic art. Goodbye for now.